Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Outrageous HR. Today, we're going to be talking about considerations for your HR budget in 2025. I'm Vicki Lenormand, Senior VP of Operations, and I have here with me.
I'm Beth Montgomery. I'm a Senior Director of Operations and Team Lead.
All right, our first topic we're going to discuss is budget for outreach. Beth, what would you recommend for your clients? What do they need to consider when thinking about outreach and their budget?
So outreach is if it's done correctly, it can take a lot of time, and time is money. And if you're a smaller organization, you may not have the time to devote the resources and properly to conducting outreach. So by having an organization, a vendor, if you will, help you with your outreach efforts, it's going to help you stay in compliance, and it's going to be a huge time savings for you.
Right. There's already these vendors who've already figured out who are the sources. They know how to track it. They've got the tools to track it. Mm-hmm. Instead of you trying to reinvent the wheel internally and take your time to do it, it makes sense to outsource that.
Absolutely.
Get that off your plate.
Absolutely. Many of these organizations, if you are conducting outreach on your own, like for instance going to job fairs or any local contacts that you have made, they may have the ability within their system, you can track that information and measure the effectiveness of those efforts, which is a requirement of federal contractors.
Yes, I know that's a struggle. Next, we're going to talk about federal and state compliance reporting. I know we have a few clients who have tried to complete the affirmative action plans in-house, as well as EEO1 and VETS reporting. They've tried to do that internally, and they've come to us because either they've had a compliance evaluation, they received that audit letter, they tried to submit what they already implemented, created, but it wasn't compliant, it was missing some of the required components, and then they've come to us to outsource so that we can help them create a compliant affirmative action plan going forward. So I know you've probably had some of those similar experiences as well.
I have, and with affirmative action and EEO1 and VETS, all of those are reliant upon you taking your jobs and fitting them into these EEO1 categories. That's the commonality between all of those reports. And what I have seen, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, that we have clients that have jobs in incorrect EEO1 categories. And again, that impacts all three of those reports. And it may be because the client has maybe somebody in the payroll department that is, they have new job titles that they're guessing what EEO1 category that fits in, or they're using previously assigned EEO1 categories. It's a new job that is similar, so they're just like, oh, we'll match that. That impacts of your EEO1s. It impacts RFPs. If you all are submitting any type of RFPs, it could request an EEO1 report. EEOC, charges of discrimination, many times those are asking for copies of the EEO1 reports, and obviously AAPs.
Mm-hmm. And I know I've had experiences where when companies try to do the EEO1s themselves, they didn't realize every establishment needed to have their own report. So they were doing one EEO1 for the entire company, but it's very specific. List out the EIN, list out the address. Every brick and mortar building needs to have their own EEO1 report. So I know there's been a lot of companies that have come to us to outsource it so that they can go to the experts who know what the requirements are, check that data, get it cleaned for you before it's submitted on these federal reports.
Who would ever think that filing an EEO1 report that you need to be strategic in how you file it?
That's true.
But they definitely have implications down the road.
Right.
How you file.
Right, and we know that the OFCCP pulls from that list to determine who might be selected for a compliance evaluation.
So having a correctly filed EEO1 report, having your job titles in those correct EEO1 categories, that is why it's helpful to have someone help you with that, because we can be strategic. So Vicki, what are your thoughts on how an organization can budget for looking at internal pay equity as well as possibly external pay equity?
With the pay transparency laws expanding, various states are adding on requirements. I know, especially when we recently dealt with the Illinois pay, companies had to, if they had over 100 employees in the state of Illinois, they had to certify that they are doing a review of their compensation and that there is not a gap, that the average of minorities compared to non-minorities can be explained by business factors, from males to females. And so I know a lot of companies struggle with that on who's going to sign this certificate, who are going to put our name down that, yes, we know for a fact we can explain it. So I know a lot of companies who thought that they were doing, internal review. They've heard from their compensation team that, yes, we're constantly looking at that. We're looking at that at merit increase time. But when it came down to, can you sign this paper as a compensation director? Then no, they didn't feel confident in that. And I do know a lot of companies came and asked, can we get outsolved to, let's look at our compensation. Let's do this external review to make sure that we can sign this paper and feel comfortable that, yes, we have done a multiple regression analysis. We've pulled in the factors of what drives pay for our organization, and it does explain it, that there is no discrimination against race or gender.
And that brings up a good point. I've had several clients over the years who have said, yes, we are conducting these pay equity analyses. And when I ask them further about it, well, they're conducting an annual, basically a benchmarking to see how they compare against the market. That's not an internal analysis to see how you're paying your employees.
Right.
Additionally, if they conduct any type of analysis, it's not based on, or it may be based on gender, but they never conduct it based on race, ethnicity. So those are all factors that you need to be including in your analyses.
Right. As well as, so for Illinois, it was minority versus non-minority. But for other states, as well as for federal, it needs to be by race, individual race. I know there's software out there that companies are trying to look at it internally, save some of that,
Absolutely.
money that they're doing it internally using their own software, but the software may not be doing it by race. So again, it's just something you need to look at to see, what are we currently doing? Do we have a team that has been doing it? Could we, again, outsource it to experts who have the way to get it done timelier? We can get it done faster, make sure it's getting done right. It's meeting the federal and state requirements. I know with Minnesota's another one that has a pay equity that you have to sign off on their certificate. So more states are adding this on. It's something we need to be considering.
And California, I mean, my goodness, what started out in California a couple years ago, they added a little bonus report in with the California pay report. So working with an organization that understands what these requirements are is a huge time savings for any company out there. So, Vicki, what are your thoughts on an organization trying to handle staying abreast of all of the labor law poster changes? What are your thoughts on that?
I know companies try to save money and see if they can go out to the different websites, state and federal websites, and print the posters themselves. I mean, takes up a lot of your time, first of all. And then to keep up to date with the changes. I think this year alone, there's 30 states that had changes. I know some companies try to go to just a poster retailer and try and print a one-time poster to get what they need for those bulletin boards. But you got to remember to stay on top of that. Did something change? It's better if you had a subscription to a poster vendor who they will just notify you. There's been a change to this state or to this regulation, and they will ship you out a new poster whenever those updates are needed. You don't have to manage that yourself. So I really do feel like that could be a full-time job, especially if you're a large employer working in multiple states, that you have to keep up with what could be changing.
I don't know if you've ever been out on a state website trying to locate what the most recent change has been. It's almost like you have to have a law degree on some of these websites to figure out what it is that you're looking for. So having an expert do that for you is huge.
Totally agree. What should companies consider when they're thinking about, I know there's workplace safety and OSHA training and reporting. What should they be considering when thinking about their budget?
So many companies likely will not have an in-house expert for these specific areas, and they are fairly complicated, and why have an internal person complete this information if they're not an expert? That's when it's best to rely on an external source that can conduct the training and complete the forms for you.
And I guess it also kind of ties into what should they consider with ACA compliance?
Well, I know, so you have forms that you have to provide to your employees, you have forms that you have to file as an employer. So if you have a benefits platform, if you have a provider that does this for you, that's fantastic. If you don't, why try to complete these forms internally? Go to an organization that can help you, that knows the rules, that knows the laws, and how to complete this information correctly and timely. So, Vicki, what about employee training? What suggestions do you have for an organization that is looking at conducting their training? Is it internally, externally? What's your idea on that?
I do have a few clients who have their own LMS, learning management system. They have a group, a team, who is devoted to creating the content. So maybe that can work for some, but I mean, that means you have to have your own. It is a team. You're spending the money on those resources, internal employees, to handle that, to make sure that they create the content is correct, up to date,
Is legal, meets the legal requirements.
and then that it's being sent, it's being tracked. That's really important, and it's different. Some are all employees need to be trained. Some are just the managers need to be trained. There's different content that needs to be in the
Absolutely.
training. So you could have your own internal team that is going to have to research and be on top of it. But I think the more cost-effective way is to outsource it to companies who've already got the content created.
Great.
Have a module that can administer those trainings, do a knowledge check, track it. I just think it's a more cost-effective way, and I think you need to consider that for your budget.
And again, going back to OFCCP audits, many audits, again, the compliance investigator will request what type of training has been conducted for managers, for employees, and having a vendor that's able to very easily provide you with that documentation so that you can provide it to OFCCP will help keep you in compliance.
Definitely. Thanks for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed our discussions on things you should consider for your HR budget.
And if you're interested in learning more, please check out our blog post on outsolve.com.